Welcome back to the Woven Well podcast. Today I've invited back a dear friend of the show, family nurse practitioner and fertility care practitioner, Laura Ducote. Laura, welcome back.
Thanks, Caitlin. Happy to be here as usual.
I always love chatting with you, and that's because we do a lot of work together just on a daily basis. And of course, I always respect how you care for women and want to empower them and help them advocate for themselves. We've been having some requests lately to talk about postpartum fertility specifically, and that is such a great topic. There are so many misconceptions out there, and I just think they'll be fun for us to chat through.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been working with the postpartum ladies a good bit this year, so I can definitely see how there would be some questions in that area. It's a totally new ballgame when you're entering that versus when you've been in regular cycles or if you've never experienced the postpartum time period before.
Yes, and you have such a specific heart for postpartum women. What do you think makes you love this demographic so well?
I mean, I honestly think a lot of it stems from my own postpartum journeys, just
Yeah.
feeling like we just need so much support that you can go to the classes, you can know a lot of things in your head. And just having somebody accompany you, I feel like in the postpartum journey and having kind of that extra support is just so needed. I mean, I feel like I was through nursing school, nurse practitioner school before I started having my babies. And I just remember feeling like there was such a steep learning curve that I was just like, wow, this is a lot. And I mean, I was just so grateful for the people that I had in my life that were able to kind of like take me under their wing or, my family or friends. And so I think that's probably where a lot of it stems is just that like in my personal experience, I felt like I was not given hardly any insight to what it actually looked like. Like it was kind of like, knowing things in a textbook maybe
Mhm.
versus like seeing them in real life. A lot of times they're two totally different experiences. And that's how it was for me. So I didn't have a lot of women in my life at that time that had already been where I was. They were either people that were experiencing it on the same timing as me, or they had done it, a long time ago, like when I was a baby,
Yeah.
like my mom or something. And so it's like, I just feel like having somebody that's like just kind of barely above you in terms of like walking it before, but still in this modern, age that we live in, so that like there's really the relatability there can just be so extremely helpful to know like, is this normal? Am I doing this right? Am I like, there's just so many questions I feel like that happen in the postpartum time period that it just makes me
Yes.
have like a big heart for that.
And you learn a lot about labor and delivery. Like, so much of pregnancy is like building up to that experience. And a lot of women just sort of get abandoned, almost at
Yeah.
that point afterwards. And there are so many different aspects of being postpartum that women
Mhm.
have very valid questions about. And we could talk about a lot of them, but the one that our people have the most question about is obviously related to fertility. So, like,
Yes.
women aren't even sure whether or not they're fertile after they deliver. Like, how quickly could they possibly conceive? Is it something they need to
Mhm.
be thinking about or worried about if they want to avoid pregnancy for a time? So, maybe we should start there with that big
Yeah,
question.
absolutely. I mean, so after birth, you're going to have about 3 to 4 weeks worth of bleeding typically. And then, we as Creighton instructors, we typically will instruct them to start charting, as soon as you have finished that bleed, because it really could be possible for any woman, depending upon different circumstances, have fertility return really pretty quickly. I mean, I do feel like there is this kind of this thought process of, well, I'm exclusively breastfeeding, so it's going to be, months away. And that is totally possible.
Hmm.
But we also just don't know that for certain in some instances. Or say there's something like we've needed to use some formula here and there, but I'm mostly breastfeeding. Or questions related to, pumping versus like nursing at the breast. What does that do? There's so many different factors for how it can affect the return of fertility in the postpartum timeframe that it really can it be very dependent on the woman. And so we
Yeah.
kind of always need to be preparing for the possibility of that fertility returning potentially fairly early, but it's also a very real possibility that it could be spaced out for, the entire time a woman is breastfeeding. I see that in some of
Yeah.
my ladies as well, but we can't kind of bank on that essentially.
Yeah, and I think, I'm putting myself in the place of a woman who is preparing to deliver and she's curious about this, or maybe just had a baby and she's listening to that and she's like, "So you're telling me you can't know? There's no way to know."
Oh,
But not quite. No, there
no,
there
there is a way
is
to know.
a way to know, but we can't know ahead of time. It to me is what you're saying. Like, we don't
Right.
know. Every woman's story is going to be a little bit different because her body's going to react a little bit differently. Each baby, I always make the joke of new baby, new body, every
Yeah.
time in multiple different ways. And, I've had clients in the past who will go, a year, maybe even close to 18 months without
Mhm.
having a return to fertility. But I had a client early on in my work where I think it was maybe her fifth child. So she had done this many times before. And she knew, she said, "I'm always between 11 and 13 months because I exclusively breastfeed. So 11 to 13 months before my fertility returns." And she gave me a call at 8 weeks because her period started out of the blue. And it sure enough did. I mean, she went on to have ovulation. She had another period and she was like, "I guess I'm back to cycling." And so it's just an example that even though she had done it so many times before, this was a unique time.
Mhm.
And that's where it's really important to be able to be knowledgeable about what
Mhm.
your body's doing. So many people out there are looking to resources online or even artificial intelligence, those kind of things to try to get the answer.
Mhm.
None of those resources are ever going to know your body like you can learn your own
Right.
body. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about what women can do to be able to predict their own return to fertility. How can they go about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of how we typically teach it, is we're looking at the cervical mucus. Your
Yeah.
your cervical mucus should be able to tell you on a daily basis. Today is an infertile day. The next day could have fertile signs to it. Each day is not a guessing game, but it is a day by day. You are not in a pattern of cycles yet when you're in this postpartum time waiting for that first period, but we are in a pattern of being able to assess the fertility of that day based off of cervical mucus. There's a lot of amazing methods out there really for postpartum at this point, but I just really love the kind of day by day knowledge that Creighton provides to me, that I feel like it allows me to really be able to see what is happening in real time and be able to kind of assess from there. Because the other part is you're trying to find that first ovulation prior to the first period. So
Yeah.
if you have kind of waited until that first period happens to then start trying to pay attention to the patterns, maybe the way you were before pregnancy, or maybe this is new to you in postpartum, then you're kind of already like behind the ball sometimes a little bit. It's almost like if you guys had been trying to space, children, or if you'd been trying to avoid pregnancy and you made it to that first period without checking anything, then you kind of got a little bit lucky. But really, like, our goal is to teach you how to be watching for that very first ovulation prior to you ever getting that period. And you can definitely know that.
So glad that you mentioned that because so many women ovulate before their first period. And I've read some research that says like at least 30% of women will ovulate
Mhm.
before, but I got to tell you, in my own client population, I think that number is way higher than 30%.
I
Okay.
would agree. Yes.
So I think it is critical to be looking for it ahead of time and not in a fearful sort of
Mm.
way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
I completely understand the mindset of, hey, we have a newborn. We are not trying to grow our family again. I need to rest and recover. And, you're absolutely right. Your reproductive system, your uterus, it needs time to recover. And um,
Mhm.
I think that's probably why that breastfeeding will naturally extend that in some cases, the time of infertility. But There is a difference between letting it be a fearful thing versus feeling informed about how the body works. And that's why I wanted to talk about this episode, because
Yeah.
if it just feels like this scary possibility that our fertility could start at any point and we don't know where it is, when it will, and what it will look like and that sort of thing, then yes, that is fear-based, that's overwhelming. And maybe sometimes that's kind of how it's presented in certain doctor's office situations. Like, well, you might as well have this IUD put in because you don't want to have kids for the next few years anyway, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of empowerment in that. There's not a lot of education in that. And so my preference, I mean, you still have the choice to have an IUD put in, you know, people can make any choices for themselves, but my preference is education, learning to understand what that return of fertility looks like, what's actually going on beneath the surface, and how women themselves can be empowered to know it, to see it, and to make decisions based off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would just totally agree with that. I don't know that I have anything to add there.
Okay, yeah, we are all on the same page. Well, one thing that I find really interesting, and as I've taught it to women over the years, they find it interesting too, is how cervical mucus plays such a role in this.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've had episodes in the past that talk about the need for cervical mucus in order to conceive a pregnancy, but also cervical mucus is revealing hormonal changes going on.
Yeah.
So, the more we understand about cervical mucus, the more we can understand what hormonal changes are happening, which can then let you know whether or not your fertility is returning. Like, it is possible to conceive or it is not possible to conceive.
Yeah.
And we can't go into all the specifics of the details of the mucus, that you can learn all that through the Creighton model system specifically. But more so than that, understanding how cervical mucus can reveal those slow changes. So we can talk about this together because you may be able to describe it far better than I can. But when a woman is breastfeeding, like, the reason that she is statistically less likely to return to fertility and ovulate is because her prolactin level, a hormone that is released when the baby is nursing at the breast, increases, and that will naturally suppress the level of estrogen that the ovaries, the eggs within the ovaries, can produce.
Mm-hmm.
So, understanding that kind of helps explain why breastfeeding could potentially delay ovulation. But
Mm-hmm.
you'll start seeing that return to fertility as the prolactin starts getting lower and lower, and the estrogen gets higher and higher. And it's kind of this almost battle between the two. You'll be able to see that. I know specifically on a Creighton chart, it comes up a lot. And so you'll
Mm-hmm.
actually know, like you said earlier, in real time, that
Mm-hmm.
you are entering into a window of fertility. With my clients, I call it the countdown. You know, you can start
Mm-hmm.
seeing the countdown happen, and it gives you this sense of competence and confidence. You know what's happening, you can see it happening, you know where it's leading, you can feel
Yeah.
prepared, you can feel knowledgeable. And I just don't think anything compares to that.
I would agree. And you're also the only one that knows like what's happening in your house, like what's happening with the nursing relationship, with the sleep situation, all of those factors. And so a lot of times as you're saying that that kind of valve that's happening, like turning off, turning on, turning off with the prolactin release, it's turning off those brain hormones that are sending signals to the ovaries to say, hey, you can stay shut down. We're good right now. We're still nursing a baby. But the less that you are nursing that baby, say you add table foods at 6 months, the less frequently that you are getting essentially breast stimulation from nursing or pumping by baby sleeping through the night and you choosing to go ahead and get that sleep, which
Mm-hmm.
we desperately need in the postpartum time, then a lot of times you're going to be able to see that reflected. Now, there may be a little bit of a time gap happening there, but you're going to be able to see that reflected in your chart as well to go, I thought fertility looked like it was kind of coming back. I was having mucus there for a little while, and then we hit an illness or we hit a sleep regression or we whatever, and then we went back to dry for a little while, but I that makes complete sense to me because I know what was happening with me and my baby. And
Yes.
so you don't feel like it's this guessing game. And sometimes it does take maybe you or I to like have many years of looking at these charts to kind of connect those dots a little bit. But, the more that they get in tune to this, the easier it becomes to be like, oh, that's what was going on. Of course, my body's not going crazy right now. It's just
Mm.
doing literally what it was made to do. This is
Mm.
beautiful.
I love that you said it like that because I think of how vulnerable a woman's relationship with her body is in that season.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, that is a tender, vulnerable time physically, mentally, spiritually. There are a lot of new things, a lot of adjustments. Identity is shifting. There's just so much that goes into all of that, and it makes me think, I want to say too that you can meet God in the middle of that season, in the
Hmm.
middle of those questions, in the middle of those transitions. I have spoken with women over the years who experienced years of infertility and struggled to conceive. And yet, when they did have their baby, then afterwards they were suddenly like terrified of conceiving, you know?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
such a shift for them, and they like don't know what to do with it. Meet
Hmm.
God in the midst of it because he
Hmm.
is there with you every step of the way and wants to provide that encouragement. I really think that the more we learn about what our body's doing, and just like you said, the more we're able to see that God designed it to function in this way. God designed it with a way for us to understand and to work with our design and not against it. And that's such an encouragement, and hopefully offers some peace to women too.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Mm.
it's just an incredible gift, I really think, to be able to have this knowledge, to really be able to look at it through this lens of
Yeah.
like the Lord has given us this gift to be able to see what's happening within our bodies, to be able to plan for our families safely, appropriately, responsibly, whatever we feel the call is. And the other thing that I think it happens in postpartum with this is you can be very like sleep deprived for a short, a long period of time and feel like, oh gosh, I could not have another one for like another year or something like that. And then you finally get some sleep again. And then it's like, actually, no. Like, we really, like, another one in about 9 months would put this one, however, far
Mm.
apart or whatever. And then it's like you can literally just be open to whatever the Lord's call is, like, right
Mm.
then in that moment. Like, you can switch gears within a month or two, once
Yeah.
baby's sleeping or, something like that. And so
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful gift to be able to just kind of go alongside whatever He is leading.
That's right. The great flexibility for either direction. As you said, any way that the Lord leads, you can follow because you are open to that and knowledgeable about it and know how to work within it. So, Laura, thanks so much for coming back on the show and chatting with me about all things postpartum. I hope it's been an encouragement to listeners.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
Yeah. Well, listeners, I'm going to link several other postpartum related episodes. We've got some really good ones, so make sure to check those out and see if any of them apply to you. And I hope that you enjoy them. Everything we do is to provide you with informative and accessible episodes that really educate and empower you about your fertility and women's health while honoring your faith. If you feel like we are doing that, if you feel like this episode did that, then would you leave us a quick review? I cannot tell you how helpful it is for getting these resources in front of women who are looking for them as they're scrolling through or searching through topics, and we appreciate it. As always, thanks for listening as we continue to explore together what it means to be woven well.